The sky above New York Prime exploded in a burst of light. At first, it looked like a natural phenomenon, a flicker in the atmosphere, a celestial event too brief to be of consequence. But within seconds, the roar of the Xorthak fleet broke through the silence of Earth's dawn. The invasion had begun. Commander Isla Drennan stood at the command center, the stark white walls of the military hub echoing the hum of machinery. The vast holographic display in front of her showed the enemy fleet, dozens of massive warships, each one larger than the Empire State Building, hovering in low orbit above the city. Their metallic exteriors reflected the first rays of morning sun, creating a deceptive calm, as though they were simply part of the skyline. But Isla's mind raced. She knew better. "Ma'am, we've got incoming," Sergeant Tomas Fields reported, his voice tinged with urgency. Isla's gaze locked onto the screen, watching the first wave of destruction unfold. Flashes of light rippled across the city as the Xorthak ships unleashed their hellfire. Laser beams as wide as city blocks carved through buildings, turning skyscrapers into flaming ruins. The ground trembled beneath their assault, and for a moment, New York Prime seemed to collapse in on itself, a city on the brink of annihilation. "Hold your positions," Isla barked. "Deploy the countermeasures now. Get me a live feed from the eastern perimeter." The hum of voices filled the command room as officers scrambled to execute her orders. Her eyes narrowed. Every second counted. The world outside was unraveling, but Isla's focus remained absolute. The Xorthak had given Earth no time to prepare. They had come with overwhelming firepower, not to negotiate, but to destroy. "Ma'am, the north sector is collapsing. The 15th Brigade is getting overwhelmed," Lieutenant Haruto Takahashi reported, his voice breaking through the chaos of the command room. He was stationed in the far north, at the city's defensive outpost. "We're outgunned. They're using weapons we've never seen before." "Understood," Isla said, her voice steady, though her insides churned. "Tell them to fall back to secondary positions. We'll reroute reinforcements. Get General Hawk on the line. Now." As the feeds came in, Isla watched with a sickening clarity as the Xorthak forces moved through the city. Their ships emitted pulses of energy that tore through the streets, erasing everything in their path. Panic spread like wildfire as citizens fled, but there was nowhere to run. The invasion was not just a fight for the city. It was a fight for Earth itself. The transmission lines crackled, and Isla's screen flickered before the face of General Hawk appeared. His grizzled expression betrayed his worry, but he stood firm, as he always did. "We're losing ground, Isla. The east side is about to be completely overrun. The Xorthak aren't just attacking, they're hunting us. The civilians. They know exactly what they're doing," Isla cut him off. "I'll send reinforcements to the east. Have your team fall back to the underground bunkers. Earth's not going down today." She turned away from the screen, her mind already shifting into overdrive. The Xorthak had struck with precision, not random destruction. They knew how to break a city. And with that knowledge, Isla knew that their first target wasn't just the buildings, it was the heart of humanity's defense. Earth had to retaliate, and it had to do so now. She paced the command room, her boots tapping sharply on the floor. The hum of machinery, the sharp commands, and the frantic reports from her team all blurred into a single, steady beat in her mind. It was time for humanity to show the invaders just what they were up against. "Tomas, get me a direct line to the EDC fleet. Prepare the orbital cannon," Isla ordered. "Tell them to launch on my mark." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his voice clipped as he moved to relay the command. She looked back at the holographic map, watching as the Xorthak ships moved in tighter formation. It was clear they were advancing in waves, precision strikes followed by complete annihilation. And with each wave, their weaponry seemed more sophisticated, more deadly. Isla's fists clenched. "Status on civilian evacuation?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the eastern sector. "We've initiated the protocols, but traffic is gridlocked," Lieutenant Takahashi responded. "We're getting reports of panic everywhere. The civilian shelters are filling up, but..." Not fast enough, Isla murmured, then raised her voice. Tomas, launched a secondary wave of drones. I need every single one in the air within the next 5 minutes. That's an order. Yes, ma'am. The drones, advanced, hyper-compact aerial defense units, were humanity's last line of defense against the invaders. Small, fast, and deadly, they could target and disrupt Xorthak weapon systems. But they were in limited supply. Only one wave of drones would be available before they were completely depleted. Isla's mind raced as she tried to calculate their chances. It wasn't enough. No amount of drones or orbital cannon strikes could stop the Xorthak for long. The odds were overwhelming. And then it clicked. Time to get really nasty, Isla muttered under her breath. The phrase echoed in her mind. She turned to the tactical officer at the far end of the room. Initiate Plan Alpha. Now. Plan Alpha was the final option. A risk, no, a gamble. It involved using Earth's most experimental weapon, one still in the prototype stage. It could turn the tide of battle, but it could also backfire and cause massive collateral damage. We don't have any other choice, Isla said, her voice hard. It's do or die. The officer hesitated for a moment, then nodded grimly. Understood, Commander. The countdown for the prototype weapon began. Isla watched as the timer ticked down, her heart pounding in her chest. The fate of Earth rested on a knife's edge, but for the first time in the history of this invasion, humanity wasn't on its heels. It was going to fight back. And it was going to fight dirty. With a final glance at the city burning outside, Isla stepped away from the command console. She knew the war had just begun. And this time, they were ready. In the depths of the Xorthak fleet, Supreme Commander Varnock watched Earth's retaliation unfold. His lips curled into a smirk. Humanity had no idea what was coming. The cold steel of the command room was a stark contrast to the inferno raging outside. Isla Drennan stood before the tactical map, her mind racing, trying to piece together what had just happened. The first wave of Xorthak destruction was a calculated strike, and the enemy was relentless. Every corner of New York Prime seemed to be under fire, and the civilian death toll was already rising by the hour. Ma'am, the drones are ready, Tomas Fields announced, his voice tight with urgency. He looked at her expectantly, waiting for the command. Isla glanced at the massive wall of screens. The drones, Earth's last line of defense, were small but potent, high-speed, agile units that could dart around the Xorthak ships like mosquitoes, disrupting their firepower and slowing their advance. But the numbers were low. Too low. They might buy Earth's forces a few minutes, but that was it. Deploy them, Isla ordered, her voice unwavering. The screens flickered, showing the swarm of drones lifting off from the underground launch sites. Their sleek, metallic forms shot through the air, darting past the charred remains of the city. Each drone emitted a piercing, high-pitched whine as they dove towards the Xorthak ships. Isla watched them in silence. The drones were small, but their weapons could disrupt the alien shields for just long enough to open a brief window of opportunity. Deploying Phase 2, the voice of Lieutenant Takahashi cut through the silence. He was in charge of coordinating the orbital cannon. Fire on my mark, Isla commanded. All units, brace for impact. As the drones closed in, beams of light flashed across the sky. The Xorthak ships retaliated, their weapons swift and devastating. 2 drones exploded in midair as they made contact with the enemy's force fields. The others quickly darted, weaving in and out of the Xorthak's fire. One by one, they sacrificed themselves to buy humanity those crucial few seconds. Damn it, Isla muttered, watching the screens as another drone was obliterated. She clenched her fists. The Xorthak had adapted quickly. Their shields were adapting faster than Earth could react. The drones weren't enough. She turned to Tomas. Have the fleet ready for a second strike. The first salvo is useless. We need something heavier. Tomas didn't respond immediately, instead typing furiously on his console. Ma'am, our fleet is still regrouping. We're not ready for a full-scale assault yet. If we launch too early, they'll be picked off one by one. Isla's mind raced. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Not with every minute that passed costing lives. Launch the prototype, she said, her voice cold with resolve. There was a brief silence. The prototype. The weapon that had been in development for years but never tested in combat. It was humanity's gamble, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of battle. Isla knew it was dangerous, hell, it could be disastrous, but it was all they had left. We're sending the signal to the launch site, Tomas said, his hands shaking as he input the final commands. But ma'am, if this doesn't work. I know, Isla interrupted. But we have no choice. The prototype weapon, a colossal railgun capable of launching projectiles faster than light, was humanity's most dangerous tool. It was meant for defense against asteroid impacts, not warships, but it had the potential to destroy an entire fleet if it hit its mark. As the final command was sent, a deep rumble shook the room. The ground trembled, and the air seemed to hum with power. The weapon was active. Prepare for impact, Isla said, her voice as sharp as a blade. Moments later, the launch sequence began. The railgun fired. A flash of light brighter than the sun erupted from the sky, streaking across the atmosphere. The pulse of energy, like a thunderclap in space, roared through the void. Isla's heart beat faster as she watched the arc of the projectile on the screen. It was too far out to see, but she knew what was coming. Seconds later, the Xorthak fleet shuddered as the projectile hit. The impact was immediate, a massive explosion that lit up the sky like a supernova. The shockwave sent ripples through the fabric of space, distorting the atmosphere in its wake. The screens in the command room flickered as the blast wave reached Earth's orbit. For a brief moment, everything went still. Direct hit, Tomas said, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. The Xorthak ships, once imposing, now wavered in the air. One by one, they began to fall back, their shields failing. The massive railgun had done what no one thought possible, it had breached their defenses. The tide had turned. But just as Isla allowed herself a brief moment of relief, her eyes locked onto the feed showing the fleet's status. There was movement. Another Xorthak ship, far larger than the others, detached itself from the formation. It hovered ominously in the distance, its size dwarfing everything else around it. It wasn't retreating. It was preparing to attack. That's not good, Takahashi muttered, his eyes wide. Isla's stomach twisted. It's their flagship. The Xorthak don't retreat, they regroup, adapt, and retaliate. The flagship's massive cannons began to glow, and Isla realized that it was charging a weapon powerful enough to obliterate an entire city in a single strike. We need to take it down, she said, turning sharply to Tomas. Tell the fleet to target the flagship. Focus all firepower. Ma'am, Tomas hesitated, his fingers hovering over the controls. We've barely scratched the other ships. The flagship? I don't care, Isla snapped. If we don't take it out now, Earth is lost. The first salvo of artillery fire erupted from the fleet, a burst of energy aimed directly at the flagship. The flagship's shields flared in response, but the massive ship's core began to destabilize under the concentrated fire. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Isla clenched her fists, adrenaline flooding her veins. This was her last chance. Earth's last chance. We've got one shot at this, she said to her team. If this doesn't work, we are on our own. As the Xorthak flagship began to charge its weapon again, Isla knew what needed to be done. Time to get really nasty, she whispered under her breath. The battle was just beginning, and Earth had no intention of backing down. The sky above New York Prime was a dark, roiling sea of destruction. The once bright cityscape had been replaced with jagged silhouettes of ruined skyscrapers, casting long shadows over the battlefield below. The sound of battle, of explosions and distant screams, echoed through the streets, and from Isla Drennan's command center, it seemed as though the world was on the brink of collapse. But even in the midst of chaos, Isla remained focused. Her mind had been sharpened, her resolve hardened by the endless hours of strategizing, fighting, and surviving. She had never been a stranger to combat, but the stakes were higher now than they had ever been. Earth had already been pushed to the edge. Now, there was no room left for failure. "Ma'am," Tomas Field said, his voice carrying a note of urgency as he approached her. "The Xorthak flagship is charging its weapon again. If we don't stop it now, it'll level what's left of the city." Isla's jaw tightened. The flagship, larger than any other ship in the Xorthak fleet, had already launched multiple devastating attacks, each one more powerful than the last. Their cannons were unlike anything Earth had ever faced. They could obliterate entire continents if left unchecked. "Have we hit it yet?" she asked, not looking away from the tactical map that flickered in front of her. "Not enough," Tomas replied, his brow furrowed. "It's adapting faster than we anticipated. The orbital cannon's energy output is drained. The drones are gone. Our fleet is taking too much damage to focus their firepower on the flagship." Isla's heart raced. The time for a calculated assault was over. Earth's forces were too fragmented, too weakened by the relentless assault. But there was still one more chance. "We need to hit them where it hurts," she muttered, thinking aloud. She turned to the tactical officer. "Get me a direct line to General Hawk. Now." The officer immediately initiated the communication. Within seconds, Hawk's grizzled face appeared on the screen. He was in the heart of the eastern sector, rallying troops to defend the city's last line of defense. "Isla," General Hawk said, his voice strained but steady. "I assume you've seen the damage. We're barely holding on here." "I know," Isla replied, her voice cold. "We don't have much time. I'm activating the backup protocol. Prepare the secondary fleet for launch. We'll need everything we've got." There was a brief silence on the other end. Hawk's face hardened, and his eyes narrowed. "You sure about this? We've never tested it under these conditions." It could be the last shot we have," Isla cut him off. "The prototype is ready. I'm not letting Earth go down without a fight." The general nodded, his expression unreadable. "Understood. I'll assemble the remaining fleet. We'll give you all the firepower we can." The screen cut off, and Isla turned to Tomas. "Activate Plan Omega." Tomas hesitated for a moment before typing furiously at his console. "Ma'am, Plan Omega is risky. It involves every last resource we have left." "I'm aware of the risks," Isla interrupted. "We don't have the luxury of hesitation anymore." As the command was entered, the hum of the facility changed. The low, constant thrum of power surged, and for a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. The secondary fleet, consisting of the last of Earth's most powerful warships, was being prepped for launch. These ships were not like the standard fleet, each one was equipped with experimental energy weapons, hyper-advanced shielding, and cloaking technology that had been in development for years. The countdown began. "Ma'am, we're ready for launch," Tomas said. "But we're going to have to get close. Close enough to breach their shields. It's a suicide mission." Isla's lips tightened, her eyes never leaving the battlefield outside. "They came here to annihilate us. We're going to show them what happens when you push humanity to the brink." With a final glance at the decimated city outside, Isla took a deep breath. "Launch." The secondary fleet shot into the sky, streaking toward the Xorthak flagship with terrifying speed. Earth's remaining ships glinted under the fiery glow of their thrusters, their cloaking fields flickering and warping the air around them. The fleet was smaller than it should have been, but each ship was a powerhouse, armed with everything humanity had learned in its fight for survival. Inside the fleet, the mood was tense, almost suffocating. The crews worked in silence, every person aware that this could be their final battle. "Fleet on approach, ma'am," Tomas called out. "The Xorthak haven't detected us yet. We're almost in range." Isla's hands clenched on the edge of the table as the seconds ticked by. The flagship, massive and menacing, loomed on the horizon. It seemed to pulse with an almost malevolent energy, as though it could feel the fleet's approach. Focus all fire on their core, Isla ordered. We take out their energy conduits, and we take out the flagship. Don't stop until it's gone. Her voice was low but resolute. Her crew had followed her through hell, and they would follow her now, no matter the cost. She trusted them, and they trusted her. It was all they had. Target locked, the weapons officer confirmed. Launching now. A series of brilliant, blinding beams erupted from the secondary fleet's warships. The first wave of energy blasts struck the flagship's outer hull with a tremendous force, shaking the very core of the massive ship. The Xorthak flagship trembled, its shields flaring to life, but the sheer power of the attack forced them to flicker and fail. The second wave hit the energy conduits, and the flagship shuddered violently. The damage was catastrophic. Explosions ripped through its massive frame, sending shockwaves that radiated outward. The flagship began to tilt, as if it were struggling to maintain its own gravity. "Ma'am," Tomas said, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. "It's working. They're retreating. The flagship's shields are failing." But even as the enemy flagship faltered, the Xorthak forces retaliated. A barrage of fire from their remaining ships slammed into Earth's fleet, breaking through shields with ease. The secondary fleet was taking heavy losses. "Keep pushing," Isla urged, not allowing a hint of fear to show. "We've got them now. Just one more push." The remaining ships in the fleet fired everything they had. The flagship, its internal systems crumbling, began to fall apart. Its last volley of fire missed by a wide margin, and with a deafening roar, the flagship broke apart, its core detonating in a massive explosion that lit up the sky like a dying star. For a moment, there was silence. Isla stared at the screen, her heart pounding. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had struck the final blow. The Xorthak fleet, now leaderless and scattered, was retreating. But the victory came with a price. The fleet was decimated. Only a handful of ships remained intact. Earth's defenses had been pushed to their limits. The cost of survival had been immeasurable. Isla looked out the window, where the city burned beneath the setting sun. She knew the war was over, for now. But the fight for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. And as she stared at the horizon, she knew one thing for certain: Earth had proven it would never back down. The stars outside the command center flickered, casting a cold, indifferent glow against the ruins of New York Prime. The once vibrant metropolis had been reduced to smoldering remains, a testament to the devastation the Xorthak had brought. Yet, amidst the crumbled towers and burning streets, there was a silent but undeniable truth: humanity had survived. Isla Drennan sat in front of a large, glowing monitor, her face gaunt and hollow from exhaustion. Her eyes, though tired, burned with an unwavering resolve. The war had cost more than anyone could have imagined, but Earth had stood its ground. She had led them through the worst, and now, the aftermath awaited. "Ma'am, General Hawk is on the line," Tomas Fields announced, his voice low, as he stepped into the command room. He handed Isla the secure communication device. Isla took a steady breath and activated the screen. General Hawk's face appeared, his eyes shadowed by weariness. He didn't need to say anything for Isla to know what he was feeling. The cost of this victory had been far too high. "Isla," Hawk's voice was grave, tinged with sorrow, "we've secured the city. But, the damage is irreparable. The civilian death toll is catastrophic. And we're still counting the losses from the fleet." "I know," Isla replied quietly, her fingers tapping the edge of her desk. "We've all paid a heavy price. But we survived." "Survived, yes," Hawk muttered. "But at what cost? Our cities are gone. Our fleet is in ruins. The planet's infrastructure is shattered. I don't think people realize how deep the wound goes." Isla exhaled slowly. "I don't need them to realize. I need them to rebuild. We all do." There was a long pause. The silence between them was heavy with the weight of the situation. The entire world had been rocked to its core, and no one knew what the future held. But one thing was clear: Earth was not finished. Isla, there's something else we need to discuss, Hawk continued, his tone darkening. The Xorthak aren't gone. We know that much. Their fleet was decimated, but we didn't destroy their entire force. Some of them are still out there, scattered, but regrouping. And now, we've got a bigger problem. Their leaders, they're furious. I've heard rumblings from the survivors. They're preparing for another offensive, one that could make the first one look like a warm-up. Isla felt a chill run down her spine. The idea of another invasion, of another wave of destruction, so soon after the first, was almost too much to bear. Yet, she knew that the galaxy, especially the Xorthak, would never stop until they had what they wanted. And Earth had only bought itself a temporary reprieve. We'll be ready, Isla said firmly. I'll start gathering intelligence, make sure we know everything we can about their movements. And we'll rebuild our defenses. We can't let them catch us off guard again. Hawk nodded slowly, though his face remained grim. I hope you're right, Isla. We've fought long and hard, but this is far from over. I know, she said, her voice thick with determination. But Earth isn't done. Not yet. Not while I'm still breathing. As the call ended, Isla leaned back in her chair, the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest. She had led humanity through the fire, but it wasn't over. The war had left scars, and those scars were not just physical. They were emotional, psychological, something deeper than anyone could fully comprehend. Earth had survived, but it had been forever changed. She turned to Tomas, who stood by her side, waiting for her next command. His face was tired, too, but his loyalty was unshaken. He had followed her through the chaos, and he would continue to do so, no matter what came next. Prepare the council meeting, she said, her voice steady. It's time we figure out what comes next for Earth. Tomas nodded, quickly typing commands into his console. Isla watched as he worked, but her mind wandered. The war had left so much in its wake, so many unanswered questions. How would they rebuild? How would they heal? The physical destruction was obvious, but the emotional toll on the people, on the soldiers, on the survivors, was something far more insidious. The scars they carried would last longer than any building collapse. The thought of her own team, their exhausted faces, their broken spirits, made her heart ache. She had always been strong, always maintained control, but now? Now she wasn't so sure. Would they ever truly recover? Was it even possible? Ma'am, Tomas interrupted her thoughts, the council is ready. We've got representatives from the EDC, the Council of Earth, and a few other military factions. They're waiting for you. Isla nodded and stood, taking a deep breath. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. Not when the entire planet was looking to her for direction. She had to lead them, guide them through the storm. They had to find a way to rebuild, not just their cities, but their spirit. The council room was quieter than usual. The weight of the previous days hung heavy in the air. The representatives, though composed, wore the exhaustion of a world on the brink. Thank you all for gathering, Isla began, her voice clear, despite the heaviness in her chest. The situation we face is unprecedented. We've won a battle, yes, but we've lost much. Cities are gone, lives are lost, and our fleet is in ruins. But we are still here. We survived. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. She saw the faces around the room, tired, scarred, but unbroken. They had all been through hell, and yet they were here, standing together. There was hope in that. There had to be. We need to rebuild, Isla continued, her tone firm. Not just our infrastructure, but our resolve. We need to show the Xorthak, and anyone else who dares challenge us, that humanity is stronger than they think. There was a murmur of agreement, but it was tempered with doubt. One of the council members, a seasoned politician named Arya Grant, spoke up. Commander, we can't ignore the truth. Our resources are stretched thin. The global economy is shattered. We've lost access to the majority of our weapons technology. The Xorthak aren't gone, and they'll be back. What will we do when they return? Isla's eyes locked on Aria's. There was no fear in her gaze, only resolve. "We fight," Isla said simply. "We fight with everything we have. We're going to rebuild. We're going to train. We're going to prepare for the next wave. And we will be stronger than ever before. We will make sure the Xorthak know that we will never, ever be defeated." The room was silent, but this time, there was no doubt in the air. The council, though battered, was beginning to find its footing. The planet was broken, but not beyond repair. "We rise from the ashes," Isla said, her voice ringing with conviction. "And when the Xorthak come again, we'll be ready. This time, they won't just face a world that fights back. They'll face a world that refuses to surrender." For the first time in days, Isla felt the faintest flicker of hope. Earth had survived. And together, they would rebuild. Together, they would rise.